I'm still digging the bottom of the barrel, still going through some of the things that I have listened to from kind of searching. Or one thing I have to address and have to kind of play with the idea of is the negative meditation that noise is kind of centered around. At the very roots of it, these projects were coming from deeply disturbed people. Other than Merspo, who's just kind of hyper creative, I think most of these projects, Atrax Morgue is a good example, and I always reference disturbing, really as disturbing as you would have, it being kind of new to the genre. A disturbing experience listening to Operation Miranda. It's weird to kind of try to straddle that. Having those heavy subject matters on a noise release and listening to those kinds of things can definitely give you some negative meditation that have a positive outcome, right? That give you an outward hatred toward bad things, so that you aren't living your life in such a carefree sort of way. We don't mind the society that we have that brings people this horrible state in which they would create noise projects like those. And I think that seeing the absolute insane extent of someone in their mind is a big part of that. Well, we have a very different thing, and I must say that I have had deep listening experiences with harsh noise music that put me into a battle with my own demons. And I think certainly with Man Hates God and Handwritten Letters, when I was recording those projects, I definitely had a battle going on at the time. I had a lot of stress and horrific meditation, you know, at the time when I was expressing those things. It was just a giant battle when I was listening in my heart and in my mind when I was listening to noise when I started out with it, and that was the use of it. Now it's become some kind of nerdy thing. I listen to it incredibly casually. I listen to it as if it's jazz or as if it's elevator music, classical music at best. I don't usually use deep listening when I listen to it now. So now it's time for me to talk about, is this something that's okay for us to do these sorts of things that might result in a little bit of exploitation in the genre. I want to kind of talk about that. I don't know how much I'm going to get into it, but I'm also going to try to clear out some of these releases that I've listened to recently. I don't want to not talk about them, but I have listened to so much that I don't want it to pile up and I don't talk about the stuff because I did take the time to catalog them all in the list that I use for this. So let's get into it. Go ahead and roll the intro. The one that I hit was For Fear of Helena, Paraphobia. Paraphobia is, I believe, the artist. No, not true. It's a single project, so it's almost like Paraphobia and For Fear of Helena are both an album name, right? I don't believe that there was any other For Fear of Helena release. No, not that's cataloged anyway. A German noise project, Die Combination. 3 releases from Die Combination, but um, it doesn't really make it really any more relevant than For Fear of Helena. It's just a short-lived harsh noise artist. The interesting thing about this, and there are many parallels to Operation Miranda's children's pornography review, Volume 1, and For Fear of Helena's Paraphobia. A lot of parallels. The number one parallel that we're missing, or that we have, the number one difference between these is one is the exploitation of children and one is the exploitation of women in general. Though looking at the cover of For Fear of Helena, you don't necessarily, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily an adult woman. I couldn't figure out where this photograph is from. And sometimes you don't want to know those things, but I want to know what the project's about, so that when I'm addressing whether this kind of thing is worth doing or something that should be wiped off the face of the planet, as far as I'm concerned, which Operation Miranda's children's pornography review has been, that plays a huge role and whether or not this is something that is going to be acceptable to society. My point being, neither one should be. It shouldn't be an argument of which one's worse than the other, But people who are sick get much sicker, and all of this, even murder in general, typically in people begins with pornography, and that's something that this tips or nods to, that this release nods to very much. This is how people become so disturbed. And that's, I believe, Charles Manson was, I don't know. There was a serial killer who greatly talked about, or who talked about being heavily influenced by pornography at a young age, and at any age really, and eventually being driven to that direction. And this is something that's using pornography pretty consistently. You can hear it, that kind of thing, and it's disgusting, and it made me want to vomit. I'm not. This is much more upsetting than anything that's going to fall on deaf ears for me. It might be tame, have a similar reaction to it, to the reference project that has been pretty much banned. And I found this, I think I listened to this on YouTube. And it's so interesting because, and that's the question, is like, okay, so one has this horrible thing that is the difference between the two is age. This is like a new version of it from 2018. The original one was from 2001 or something. That's what I'm thinking, right? That's my brain. It's the same release, but it's not as blunt as the other one. The problem with it not being as blunt is people aren't necessarily going to take it as a bad thing. It becomes exploitation. And exploitation, sexploitation, let's say, is a huge issue. And for it not to have a negative effect on you is an incredibly dangerous thing. This is people that could be horrifically damaging to so many people. To go further, you know what I mean? And of course, like, you have young kids, right? What happens when people become interested in noise music at a young age, like 11 or 12 years old, like we probably did with some kind of rock music, grunge maybe, metal? Eventually, this is going to be the thing that they get into. And when they get into it, do you want us to be trivializing something like the exploitation, taking advantage of women and pornography? Do we want that? Do we want them to see women in the way that women are presented in this release? So you have to think about it. Are people going to think of this as criticism? You have to look at it the way they're going to look at it, because they might not look at it as a criticism. This is a super dangerous, super positively effective if it's the right person that's listening to it. But it's just the opposite if it's the wrong person, and you could be creating a monster. I hate to be, Nancy Reagan or whatever of the noise community, and saying that we need to be responsible about what we're putting out into the world. But I can't help it. I don't care about anything when it comes to just the kind of thing that these kind of releases could possibly bring on. They are, in some cases, highly regarded by me, because that's the good thing about noise. It has a real emotional impact. But when it goes too far mainstream, and it is very mainstream compared to what it was in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, we're not looking at the same playing field. It seems like absurdity to me. It definitely represents absurdity. I am not going to make the claim that this artist was approaching the project in a positive way. But again, you have to think about, and that's our job, I suppose, as curators, to think about what this is doing. And yeah, I'm a little bit let down by that, because the one being more extreme and having that word children and having a much more, someone who you would more readily assume to be young on the cover, immediately hatred, right? This is not necessarily that. This is more tame. Is it a criticism? Possibly. And it's not something that's going to get banned because it's not outright disgusting like the other one is. The end plays a huge role in it. It had a reference from the movie Bully. It had, oh goodness, she said, I told you he was kinky. What did you expect? You know what I mean? If you haven't seen Bully, don't watch it. It's not necessarily, I don't think it's important to see. But it's in there with like the Harmony Korine movies. It's very much like Kids, but with murder. So it's not as much of a view. And I suppose for people that are interested in pictures, then pictures in film, then for people that are interested in film, I suppose that's another thing to look at. Is that valuable? Is that something that you want to uphold in society? Those kind of movies, and they haven't been. That was something that happened. Those kinds of movies are about youth and kind of falling apart at a young age. I don't know what to think about that. They sound distressed in the Bully clip. I wasn't going to worry about what any other audio was taken from. Maybe there was more taken from Bully. Maybe there was. I would assume that's mostly just porn that you're hearing when you listen to this. At the very end, and this is where I had a hard time deciding. It begins the same way that it ends. It's a woman talking to a guy, but there's a guy and a woman having discourse about a butt plug at the end of the project, and the way that they talk about it, I don't like. I feel like it's not critical, but at the very end, you hear her yelling and telling him to stop. He had previously said, "You just tell me when it's." Okay, this is, and I'm very, very back and forth on whether this is valuable, and it's all writing on the way that they ended it. He's saying, "You just tell me when to stop, and I'll stop." I think. And he doesn't stop. She's screaming, telling him to stop it. And that's the way the release ends. Spoiler alert. So that makes me kind of think that he had a positive. But how many people listen to releases from back to back? You would kind of need the full picture, and it could definitely be taken out of context. I don't know if that's a risk I want to run. For the sake of art, because you can take. They say even Satan. Well, okay, what they say, even Satan will quote the Bible in order to imply his own meaning. You can really splice and dice passages to say what you want them to say instead. So what do you say about this stuff? There's no, and there never has been a good way to censor content. And a lot of things are censored now. It seems like there's a big revolution of anti-censorship and complete freedom artistically, and then there'll be, like, Bandcamp recently has been very sensory. But if you know how to find it, and it'll always be that way. If you know how to find something, you'll find it. Speaking of an artist I don't think does that well. The problem with a lot of artists is they don't just do one release like that. They do release after release after release like that. And they are all sexploitation releases, just tons of sexploitation releases. Maybe they're a criticism, but maybe they're not taken the right way. Maybe people get addicted to those kinds of things. Just like you're pushing the standards of what's acceptable, people are going to push those standards of what they find acceptable to listen to or take in or experience. And it's such a tricky concept, but everybody's going to take it in differently. That's it. If the right person, I don't think pornography is a good thing for anybody. Does music serve the same purpose of pornography? For either of those releases, I would say no. So I'm not going to be the one to say they should be wiped off the face of the planet. Richard Ramirez, Richard Ramirez had a project called Hooked Talons that was at the bottom of the Harsh Noise, at the bottom of the barrel, let's say. Richard Ramirez has some stuff that is absolutely disgusting. I remember listening to him very early on. He's a famous noise artist, huge deal. And there were kind of porn samples, I suppose, in it like that. I don't know what to think about it. It's definitely in a negative context. Usually those things are in a negative context. That's the way I would like it to be. But In a modern era, I don't know if we have the room for that kind of stuff because it doesn't sound crazy anymore. We listen to Harsh Noise because we're like, oh, that was cool. I've said this before. They sound like guitar solos, or they sound like cool tone. They close off the rest of the world so you can focus on something. It's not a deep listening experience like it used to be. It's not a crazy, shocking thing that you just came across anymore. It's very, very well documented. There's a ton of fans, and there's like a community around Harsh Noise, so you don't know what to do. Hook Talons, Satine. Okay. Um, this is a Richard Ramirez project, and he did 4 releases under this: the Monon Tower, sorry, Birds, Satine, Tubilowski. I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry, but it seems to reference the Native Americans, and it's a Harsh Noise project. This was Harsh Noise Wall. I don't know if they're all Harsh Noise Wall. Maybe Hook Talons. The Birds cover looks cool. This was kind of cool. He was down there in the bottom with Gender Sabotage, but I didn't find a way to listen to it. But so I did not. Yeah, just skipped it, which is fine with this. It feels like Harsh Noise Wall. Okay, kind of like a Harsh Noise Wall. So old school Harsh Noise, compressed style. We'll say for that. Bang Bang AIDS, what is that doing here? This was supposed to be a new episode. This ended up being a Rat Charm. This ended up being, I went down there to find some Screamo, and it was just me taking a break, I suppose. It's not wonderful, but there's no Screamo at all. By the way, make Harsh Noise Walls. Make as many Harsh Noise Walls. If you like to make Harsh Noise Walls, make a lot of Harsh Noise Walls. Because while I'm on the fence about whether a lot of these exploitation releases are worth doing, there are some that are disgusting and disturbing and just need to go. So, disgusting and disturbing in a bad way. They need to go. There are a lot of trash Harsh Noise Walls. So have fun making Harsh Noise Walls. Don't feel bad about releasing a lot of them. Go crazy, okay? Make some cool stuff. Make some sci-fi based stuff. Make some whatever, okay? Because I'm sick of the nasty stuff. We have to clean it up, clean up our act. And if we're going to allow something nasty, it needs to really, really make a point. But I like the Screamo. I noticed the bottom of there's a difference between the bottom of the Noise one is relatively highly regarded. If you just go to the bottom 125, the bottom of the Noise chart, relatively highly regarded Noise projects. Those are nice to look through because that's where I found the what was the one that's where I found For Fear of Helena. These are relatively highly regarded Noise projects, not bottom of the barrel. Really doesn't have that feel. If you go to the bottom of Harsh Noise, you're gonna have a variety. You're gonna have Harsh Noise Wall and Harsh Noise. If you go to the bottom of Harsh Noise Wall, trash. It's absolute trash. A lot of stuff that you can't find a link to. You can't figure out how to listen to it. It kind of sucks that stuff's cataloged when you can't even find a way to it, but a lot of these people delete their Bandcamp pages. But there was also a lot of miserable, extensive exploitation there. And you know what? That's on me. I took the censorship thing off of my regular music permanently, and I don't know that I would want to fix. Again, I don't know that I would want to fix it, but it's not really nice to just come upon certain projects that have covers that you don't, and they don't need that cover. Oh Glorious Death. I don't know if this is a harsh. I said it's a wall. It's full band. It has glassy at times, so there's obviously variation in tone, possibly compressed, but I'm still going with wall. And it has a lot of emphasis on high mid. Oh Glorious Death, Hermit. This wasn't amazing, but it's a good release, and it's from 2017, which is really interesting when you're getting Harsh Noise Walls and Ambient Noise Walls from 2017. Those are roots, man. There's not a whole lot that's earlier on than that. Again, Richard Ramirez was one of the only guys that we have, at least in the archives here, that was doing Harsh Noise Walls way back then. The Rita and Vomir. You know what I mean? Stetson, Sadler and Seder Rituals. It's one of the strongest ambient noise walls that I've heard in a little while. Stetson Stadler kind of disappeared as far as I know, but this was a really great release, and he played well with Seder Rituals. It was really, really solid, and only from 2022, not that old. I went through and listened to a lot of Seder Ritual stuff and gave those ratings. I could stand to possibly to listen to some more of that stuff. It's crazy that I would have left any of those without ratings. So I figured, hey, let me go in there and get them, and that was one of them. And I noted that one. He also did a release called Days in the Sun. I wanted to listen to it. It looks cool. Couldn't access the link. Eugene Critchley he also did a split with, and I was able to find, because much like the Gates of Hypnos one, it was a split, very good again. I like the super soft, almost bubbly ambient noise wall, and Eugene Critchley mimics Stetson Sadler style a lot more than Seder Rituals, is what I was referencing there. I'm much more happy with the way that Tremo played along with him, though. It's nice to have a little bit of diversity and that little bit of a step from almost nothing. I do like the tone of a classic noise wall as well. Fucked Up, You're the Pig. Yeah, Fucked Up is one of the best hardcore bands. Oh my gosh, so good. I think I had the Triumph of Life. I don't know if that was the 7-inch growing up. And they are one of the greatest. They're just really one of the greatest bands. That was a weird one. It was more like an EP than an album. You're the Pig. It was okay. It's considered to be a compilation, and it's the main thing that you want with You're the Pig is the full version of You're the Pig, and then you want to listen to the Black Hats, Musta, Lunta, Anorak City, For My Friends. You can skip all the UK edit, the US edit, and the Japan edit. They're there. Not really worth. I'm not a huge Fucked Up fan, but they're really cool. I'm gonna actually read what Aaron LeClaire is saying here on it. The A side of the 19-minute power chord psychedelic rock epic with operatic hardcore screaming, vintage psychedelic organ, and Godspeed You Black Emperor-esque structure and dynamics. Post rock, you mean? By itself, its audacity to cross so many genre boundaries without irony while yielding a coherent in. By the way, the reason I say coherent that way is because of George Costanza. It sucks what the sitcoms can do to a man. While yielding coherent, interconnected whole makes the Year of the Pig one of the best songs of the year. The B-sides is far less essential, though. The CD version of the single contains not one, but 3 alternate 7-inch mixes of that single. Then, in focusing on only 1 or 2 movements of the song, dilute it down to nothing. Yeah, that's what I was saying. You don't want to listen to the 3-minute, 4-minute, or 5-minute version of Year of the Pig. It's just not valuable anymore. I can see upholding that. I can see saying, "Oh, it's so good," and wanting it to be more accessible to people when you have a really, really great project, like a 20-minute song that has as much going on as that does. Yeah, you want a lot of people to hear it. It's not for everybody else, you know what I mean? We're listening to 15 albums every day. You're making 1 album per year. You have to understand that we're going through that. We're going to see it when you put that effort into it. But Fucked Up is a band kind of like Thou. I see a lot of similar, like hardcore and sludge metal. Thou and Fucked Up. They're some of the coolest bands, and they are experimental without going all the way to falling under that post-rock subgenre. Really cool band. If you're not into them, check it out. They have a lot of really great albums, and I would like to listen to them some more. I did a lot of hardcore listening one night. I've mentioned my love for Birds in Row, and they did come about. And I didn't catalog everything, but I know Have Heart was one of those bands. I must have decided that I did not want to talk about hardcore on Noise with Ivan. But yeah, I had a little bit of a hardcore phase. I don't know what I was doing, but I was capable of. I was writing a Bible study. That's what I was doing at the time. I was writing a Bible study, and yeah, like reading and writing, just kind of going over my notes. Maybe that's why. And I had taken my notes from the laptop to a notebook, and I was recopying everything, and I was listening to, just a handful of hardcore releases. That was one of them. Yeah, Have Heart and Songs to Scream at the Sun, obviously, would you think I was listening to? And You're the Pig. It's not usual for me to do something like that, but it was fun. Felipe Petit and Friends, I already talked about this. This is EAI, Electroacoustic Improvisation. Super, super fun. Friend sent me that, and I am honing in on. I'm not completely out. I spent too much time talking about exploitation and whether or not it's a powerful thing to do or not. And that stuff gets old, you know? Like, when I constantly reference the way that film was in the 60s and 70s, even the 50s. It was probably the biggest deal in the 40s and 50s, exploitation in film. But in the 70s, when that code went away, there wasn't really any use for exploitation anymore. Like, when that code went away, things changed quite a bit. There was just regular pornography, and that went into I don't know. It's really futile situation of media. And I would just like us to fight against things like pornography. And I think Noise does a good job of pointing out the problems with it, um, and mirroring it, and mirroring pornography and smut. And it has always done that, but it might be time to end that. That might be over for us. There's an era, a new era, and Noise isn't quite as shocking and horrifying as it was back in the day when those releases were so notorious for being so horrific. We don't necessarily see it as being horrific anymore, so it's not really appropriate to make something that mirrors smut and things like that. I'm going to shout out Crepuscular Entity and Infected Scab. This was something I put on while I was washing dishes, and it was great, but it was short. I didn't even get done washing the dishes before it was over. And but Noisy Conspiracies 2020. This is a great project. I love it has a noisecore vibe to it. It has a harsh, like, the punk rock side of noise music to it. And Infected Scab did a great release, and it was, kind of had that warm sound, even though it was screeching harsh noise, and had a lot of high stuff. It uh it just felt old. It had the screeching dynamics, but it was, again, that warmth was there. That had the nails on a chalkboard, but also that kind of tape feel, metal and metal scraping against itself, that kind of thing. Not really enjoyable noise, harsh noise. Yeah. uh, I don't know what harsh noise means. There's a lot of different types of noise. This is the type of harsh noise. It's not the ooh type of harsh noise. I asked Brian what he thought about this because he's worked with Ken Jameson many times. But I feel this way, and I feel like this release represents that a lot. Is you send some tracks to Ken, and he mimics the style that you used and does it better. And then you're like, oh. He's like, yes, let's do a split. And you're like, yeah. So you're going to need my expertise for your label. And he just does an amazing job. Yeah, he's an incredible noise artist. And so is Disfigured Robot Child. Maybe that's why Disfigured Robot Child doesn't feel that way, because he's, such a skilled noise artist. Disfigured Robot Child is constantly talking about listening to, making noise. You don't get noise artists that are that committed. This will be all for today. I always apologize, but yeah, this wasn't a whole lot of releases, but when I came to that stuff, I had to, and I was reviewing it, do I like it or not? I don't know. It's a tough thing, but this is, I suppose, a chance for us to work out whether or not this stuff is, what are the standards for this kind of stuff, and I think that it's over. That release was from 2017, so it was only about 10 years after, maybe 15. So I don't know if it was too late. I wasn't really involved at the time. What are you going to do? What do I say? Just something to think about. I think we might be at a place where it's time to get a little bit more conservative. Thank you so much. Godspeed. Check out the new, I don't know if we've sold out at the time that this video is going up, but if you have not got the May batch, get the May batch. I think the tour is over, but the tour was great, guys. We all enjoyed the tour. Many of our artists did go on a Europe tour. One day I might play shows with them. When I'm tired of making noise with Ivan, then I'll go play shows. Okay, but I'm busy making a podcast right now. Godspeed. Have a good rest of your week.